Blog Talk Radio.
Hey, what's cracking? Good evening. This is Darren PhatMan McDuffie welcoming you to another episode of Perfectly Healthy and Toned Radio, otherwise known as the PhatMan Radio Show. I am your host again, Darren McDuffie, and took a little bit of time off. I think we took some time off for Thanksgiving, so I hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving. Just a few reminders before the show starts tonight. If you have not subscribed to me on iTunes, please do so. It's very easy to listen to the shows that way. Just put them in your iPod, and you can listen to them. Also, please like my Facebook fan page. I'm the Fat Man. Just look for it on Facebook and go in there and like the fan page, because that's the way that you'll be updated when all the shows are happening. So please do that. And also, connect with me on Twitter at @thefat, that's PHAT_man, and connect with me on Twitter. I do tweet. I'm not a big tweeter, but I do tweet, and you can be connected to me that way. So, again, good episode tonight. I'm really excited about this episode. I actually met this guy in person, Jimmy Moore, author of Cholesterol Clarity, the first person I ever met in person that I've actually listened to his podcast and got a chance to meet him live. So we actually met about 5 minutes away from my house here in South Florida, and he agreed to come on the show. And he's going to talk tonight a little bit about cholesterol, and we're going to get some clarification on cholesterol. I know many of the audience out there might think that cholesterol is bad, but we're going to dispel that myth tonight and give you some pointers on what to look for when you go to the doctor and you get those cholesterol readings. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Jimmy on right now. Jimmy Moore, welcome to PhatMan Radio. How's it going?
Hey, man, what's cracking, as you say? I love that.
Yeah, that's a little something that I picked up, so I always say that, what's cracking. Everything is good, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm crack-a-lacking along, my friend, just trying to stay warm.
Sounds good. I know we were talking before the show about living in Florida and the fact that we have 75, 80-degree weather here right now, and you're probably freezing your little buns off right now.
Yeah, you're spoiled in Florida, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know. We are very spoiled. If the temperature gets at 70 degrees, you see people with all these big jackets on. I thought that was the oddest thing when I first moved to Florida. But
yeah.
But I guess you get used to it, and now I'm one of those people that when it's 70 degrees, I'm grabbing for my jacket now. So you get used to it.
Yeah, I grew up in Pensacola, so I kind of know what you're talking about. So.
Yeah. So let's get into this cholesterol thing. I don't want to keep you too much tonight, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic because this is something that kind of hits home to me, and I know it hits home to you from reading the book. So Let's kind of get into this. And before we get into just talking about cholesterol, I think we need to kind of get into the history. So can you give us just a brief history of how we got to this whole thing of saturated fats causing high cholesterol, which causes heart disease?
Well, it happened a long time ago, and it really did, but not really that long ago in the grand history of the world. We're talking the 1950s when all of this kind of turned around. Before I get into that story, before then, I mean, think about it. Our great-grandma, our grandma, they used real butter. They used lard. They used all these real food-based fats to cook literally everything in. And traditional cultures around the world, always saturated fat was the prized possession of the diet. And so for all these years, we did just fine. There was no heart disease, not like it is today. There was no obesity like it is today. There was no diabetes. We were pretty darn healthy. But in the 1950s, there was this scientist named Ansel Keys, and he observed in some studies where there were some rabbits who were fed saturated fat, and they got heart disease. So what they don't tell you about that study is rabbits are herbivores. So they're not designed by God to be eating saturated fat. So you feed an animal that's not supposed to eat saturated fat, it's not surprising that they get heart disease. So he extrapolated that, though. Well, if it's that way with rabbits, then it must be that way with humans. So he's able to go around the world and do this 7 countries study. There was actually 20-something countries involved in the study, but a whole bunch of them didn't fit his paradigm of more saturated fat leading to higher rates of heart disease. But he didn't care about that. He only cared about proving his own point, so he only published the 7 that had the data that proved his point. And, of course, he got on the front cover of Time magazine and was heralded as a thinker and innovator in nutrition. Fast forward into the 1970s, this is becoming national policy now with the likes of George McGovern, who's trying to, push low-fat diets and, eliminating saturated fat from the American diet and pushing that as healthy, and having the government make dietary recommendations to Americans about how they should be eating. So that happened in the late 70s and into the early 80s is when we started the food pyramid, which is now today known as My Plate, and the dietary guidelines come out every 4 years or every 5 years, in America still to this day, and they still promote healthy whole grains, low-fat diets. It's just we've been led down this wrong path to nutrition that unfortunately it's just unfortunate that it's become such a part of our culture that people don't even question it anymore, Darren. I mean, it's just amazing to me. People just obediently, when you say eat healthy, they know what that means. They know cut your fat, cut your calories, and go exercise at the gym an hour a day. Unfortunately, that's just not going to be effective for everybody.
Yeah, and wasn't McGovern on a low-fat diet himself at that time?
Yep.
Oh, so the blind are leading the blind here. So
indeed.
Yeah, so let's talk a bit about, if you can kind of break cholesterol down to us, the components of cholesterol, because I know some people out there may not understand it. I understand it, but I just try to give the audience just a brief understanding of the components of cholesterol: HDL, LDL, VLDL. Can you kind of explain those to the listeners?
Sure. So when you get your cholesterol results back from your doctor, you usually see a total cholesterol number. Okay, so what that total cholesterol is the combination of your LDL-C number, your HDL-C number, and this number called VLDL. Now, don't let VLDL throw you off. Basically, all VLDL is your triglyceride number divided by 5. So that is how they kind of incorporate that into your total cholesterol, is making it into that VLDL. So the LDL, we're going to come back to that one in just a second because it's a little more complex. But HDL is the good cholesterol everybody's been hearing about. So you want to have the HDL cholesterol to be as high as you can get it, because it is basically the part of your cholesterol that will help remove the bad part of your cholesterol, if that kind of makes sense. It acts kind of as a broom for removing the LDL, okay? So that's the HDL, and you definitely want to have that over 50 and optimally over 70. Most Americans are walking around like I was before I lost all my weight and changed to a high-fat, low-carb diet. Most are walking around with upper teens, low 20s, even 30, and they're being told, oh, that's okay. No, that is not okay. You need to have your HDL get higher and optimally over that 70, and you got to do that by eating more saturated fat in your diet. If you're not eating saturated fat, you probably will not see your HDL cholesterol go much above 35 or 40. You've got to ramp up your fat. So that's the HDL. LDL is an interesting one because everybody panics when they see their LDL cholesterol go over 100, and you know this because you've read my book now, but did you know that's just an estimated, calculated number, that LDL-C number. It is not exactly measured, Darren, and a lot of people, I think that surprises them when they realize that number that is being predicated on so much of their health and whether they should be taking a drug or not is simply a calculated number using this thing called the Friedewald equation. And the Friedewald equation basically takes your other numbers and calculates what your LDL should be. Unfortunately, when you have lower triglycerides and higher HDL cholesterol, that Friedewald equation really is off. It doesn't calculate it very well, which is why I tell people in Cholesterol Clarity, go get an NMR lipoprofile test done, because it's a little more advanced version. It measures directly exactly the number of LDL particles that you have, but also the size of those particles, which becomes important, because not all LDL is bad. There is some good LDL, the large fluffy kind, and there's bad LDL, which is the small dense kind, and it's the small dense you're trying to avoid. So get that test run. It's going to tell you a whole lot more than that estimated calculated LDL-C number. And then with total cholesterol, most of the time people are like, well, I have a 215 total cholesterol, and my doctor wants to put me on a statin drug, Lipitor, Crestor, one of those. And 215 doesn't tell me anything. Knowing your total cholesterol is like knowing the end of a baseball game is 25, or the end of your basketball game was 150. You don't know if it was a 100 to 50 game, or if it was, 75 tie. You just don't know what that means. And one of those numbers is a number you want to have higher, your HDL cholesterol. So why are we medicating people predicated on a total cholesterol number that one number you want higher, another number is estimated, calculated? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I found that to be one of the amazing things when I read your book, because I knew about cholesterol, but I didn't know that Friedewald equation was just an equation. It wasn't anything precise. It was just some equation that they pulled out the air, and then they're just telling people now that you're supposed to go on a statin based upon the fact that you do have bad cholesterol, LDL, in your body. So I just thought that was another crazy thing.
And I don't blame them for wanting to maybe cut costs, because it probably does estimate very well